No, sir, business. I have not been knighted by the king yet.
Then what should I call
Just
you?
now.
Just now. Okay lah. Today I want to interview you about the wind turbine energy. Okay. Before we go to the main topic, can you briefly explain about yourself?
I am ex-Tenaga National. Worked in Tenaga for about 37 years. I've been retired 20 years and been involved in energy efficiency and renewable energy. I know a bit about wind. I'm not an expert on wind energy, but it's part of the renewable energy. And I've been involved in government policy making for renewable energy, as well as the CRIMS project on renewable energy resource mapping. So personally, I've been involved in a biomass power plant, the first biomass power plant that was successful in Sabah.
I have read some employment, some your research about. Okay.
Can you tell us about the prospect of renewable energy, specifically wind turbine energy for Malaysia?
I was actually part of the team that formulated the renewable energy policy and action plan. So in that we estimated that renewable energy can give Malaysia by 2020 up to about 2,000 megawatts and by 2030 up to over 3,000 megawatts. But then NKEA did on photovoltaic and they emphasized a lot on photovoltaic farms. With that they can get 3,000 megawatts by 2020 and over 4,000 megawatts by 2030. But there's a big problem. And what we planned originally to say 2,000 megawatts by 2020 now is going to be hard to achieve because the biomass base cost for the feedstock has gone up so high that it cannot be economic for burning for power generation. Photovoltaic is only economic if you get the feed-in tariffs. Wind energy, according to the technical knowledge, internet knowledge and others, there's virtually no wind energy potential in Malaysia. In fact, not only in Malaysia, all the tropics, all around the tropics, wind energy is very low. The nearest in Malaysia to have wind energy is South Thailand, Philippines has a lot, and Indonesia has a lot. But in Malaysia, we don't anticipate much wind energy. But if you have done your web search, you know about this organization called FIDA, Sustainable Energy Development Authority. I was working with them for a while, and they have engaged consultants to do a wind mapping study for Malaysia. They started this about 1.5 years ago. It was supposed to be finished by this year, but I'm not sure whether they have finished or not.
So, sir, how about the potential of wind turbine? So, is there any potential of to do wind turbine energy in Malaysia?
If somebody can design turbines that can run on very low wind speed, then we may have a little bit of wind potential. But nothing that's substantial or that can contribute significantly to the national energy mix.
But like in Pantai Island, we already have a farm.
Okay. You mentioned to me that you got figures for that Pulau Perhentian, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you have the figures? How much are they generating in electricity? Because do you need to sit down?
Like Pulau Perhentian dan Tomang Test dekat Sabah yang pakai Pulau Bangi, if I'm not mistaken. Orang ada
Pudat.
ya. Pulau Simpang Kemayan Pulat. I don't actually remember the name. Tapi dia pakai wind farm under Sabah Energy Enterprise, if I'm not mistaken.
Tapi berapa kapasitinya?
Still run on low capacity lah.
Low capacity. And you see, there's a University of Malaya lecturer who did a study on wind power in Malaysia. So he did mainly internet search and then used simulation software to find what power generation is possible. So his report shows that if you put 1,500 kilowatts wind turbine 1500 kilowatt designed at 12 meters per second speed. Okay, that's the nominal design speed. But in Malaysia, the speed is about 4 to 5 meters per second only. Average is about 2.5 to 4. Highest about can go to 7. But on an annual basis, about 4. Now that 1500 kilowatt turbine can only generate 150 kilowatts. Only 10%. So it's not economic.
It's not economy. So the potential is not so high. Still.
But it's not economic.
Yang tu on land. How about
Offshore.
offshore punya?
Okay. When I was with the SIDA group, this was before SIDA was formed, it was called MBIPV, Malaysia Building Integrated Photovoltaic. But we were the preliminary to SIDA being formed. Now, there's one Chinese workshop, hardware, not hardware, steel workshop in Sandakan. So he designed, fabricated an innovative design locally. So he used a Kanchil dynamo and his own windmill to generate 50 kilowatts wind farm. No, one wind turbine. But that 50 kilowatt never operated for long and never gave 50 kilowatts.
Why?
Because the wind is not strong enough. And he was planning to do something for offshore. So he worked with Dr. Barong who was in Sirim. He's retired from Sirim now. And he was trying to get MOSTI funds to do a research project. I think Dr. Barong managed to get him some money. And Dr. Barong as a technical expert worked with him. And that was about 5 years ago. Up to now, nothing is completed. As far as I know, nothing. The best that I know about is the SIDA's consultancy. They have, I think, Indian consultants working with the local companies do the wind mapping for Malaysia. Under the Sirim project, UMT, University Malaya Terengganu, there's a Dr. Nazri. I think his name is Nazri. He was handling the project they put 10 sites for towers to measure the wind power. And they were putting it different. Normally in Malaysia, all the research has been done at 30 meter height. So they said 30 meter height is not enough, we've got to go higher. So they were doing research at 60 meters and 80 meters. Again, that was supposed to be completed 2 years ago. But as far as I know, there's nothing positive has come out of it. It will be worthwhile for you to check out with SIDA whether their study, wind mapping study, has been completed and what the results are. Actually, I may be meeting some SIDA people tomorrow, so I can check with them what is the status, and if I find anything, I can pass it on to you.
Okay.
But do you have any context or have you tried?
Yeah.
You have, right?
I have.
Okay. So that will be the good thing to get as far as the technical purpose is concerned. Now the Pulau Perhentian, as far as I know, we were trying to get the performance statistics from TNB. TNB said they can't give the figures because it belongs to state government. State government said they don't know what the hell head or tail about it. Go to the contractor. The contractor said I can't give anybody because my contract with TNB, I give TNB, TNB gives the state. And I said the state still has to report to the Energy Commission. So are you reporting the Energy Commission? This was about 2 years ago. They said, well, so far we have not reported. So when I checked with the Energy Commission, they don't have any statistics. So the performance, as far as I know, I think the wind turbine in Pulau Perhentian is 100 kilowatts. 100 kilowatts on average should be able to generate about maybe 10,000 kilowatt hours a month. But I don't think it's generating even a quarter of that. So if you have the figures, you can check the figures. Okay. Now, do you know how you calculate the output of energy from a wind turbine or PV? See, photovoltaic has a capacity factor of about 16%, which means for 1 kilowatt photovoltaic, you get about 90 to 100 kilowatt hours a month. That makes about 1,000 to 1,100 kilowatt hours a year. Now, wind turbine has a capacity factor of 30%. Right? That means for 1 kilowatt, you should be able to get up to 240 kilowatt hours a month. Now, that is if the wind speed is designed to the ratings for which the wind turbine is designed, which I said is about 12 meters per second. Now, if it is only about 4 to 5 meters per second, you get about 10%. So you get about 24 kilowatt hours a month. So it's useless.
So what?
So if you have figures, right, that means 100 kilowatt turbine, 100 times 24 kilowatts becomes 2,400 kilowatt hours a month, which is nothing.
So for the perhentian wind turbine energy, is the like program itu berjaya.
Nah, itu yang saya kata lah. Saya tak ada data, performance kita tak ada. Jadi saya tak ada boleh bagi penilaian macam mana. Tapi tahu saya, 80% daripada energy generation Pulau Kelantan ada dari fotovoltaik dan diesel.
Oh,
Vietnam punya
Jadi kata you dah dapat
Ya.
details untuk
dah dapat
Pulau Kelantan?
detail. Tertinggal dia punya file tertinggal.
biasanya in Vietnam, some of Malaysian company spend about 800 million, if I'm not mistaken, for their wind farm project.
In Vietnam, the wind energy is viable.
But why not Malaysian government persuade them to invest for the Malaysian market?
Okay, let's say hypothetically, they invest 800 million in Vietnam, they can get revenue sale 100 million a year. If they invest 800 million in Malaysia, they get 10 million a year.
Okay.
So what's the point of investing in Malaysia? You nak invest untuk dapat kutipan revenue. Jadi kalau tak ada revenue, tak ada guna. Macam coal-fired power station, yang invest sampai 6 billion ringgit. Tapi daripada 6 billion ringgit, they're getting enough revenue to pay off all the debts, operating costs. So if you don't get the revenue, no point in investing. I know one of my friends who wanted to invest up to 50 megawatts of wind turbine. So I told him, look, have you done your calculations correctly? Because he said that for his calculation, if he gets 36 cents per kilowatt hour for wind turbine, his project is viable. So I told him, I don't think that is correct, because some Danish consultants said they need about 95 cents per kilowatt hour to make it viable in Malaysia's conditions. So they wanted the same rate as photovoltaic, and say we can't give that rate because there's no guarantee that you're going to provide enough energy, and there's no money to pay you for that. So they never come back. And this guy who wanted to pay 36 cents per kilowatt hour, I actually told him, it is my LinkedIn post. I said, if you invest in this, you're going to lose a shirt off your back. But has not invested yet. So the best is SIDA's wind power study. You can look at the SIRIM study for renewable energy resource mapping. As far as I know, the wind mapping part was not completed when the project was completed, but they are supposed to have done it by this year. So on the SIRIM website, you can get this. You can get also from the SIRIM website probably the name of the professor who's handling this project, University of Tengganu.
Oh, yang
Yeah, so that's it. And you can try to communicate with them whether they have any study. But SIDA should be able to give you the status of their study with the international consultants. Now, I know, Thailand, I think, has projected for about 700 megawatts of wind turbines. Vietnam can get 7,000 megawatts of wind because the wind in Vietnam is very consistent. It's high speed consistent. Philippines, I know about 10 years ago at an international seminar, they said in the north of the Philippines, there's enough wind to generate 70,000 megawatts of wind power. But in Malaysia, not even 700 megawatts, not even 70 megawatts. So if you are looking at in terms of renewable energy total, yes, there's a lot. Wind is very low.
Kan dekat sempadan Malaysia, Thailand, there's a rumours about government want to do the wind farm there because the wind velocity quite
Dekat
high.
Sadao and north of Sadao,
Yeah.
they already have a lot of wind turbines. But they are the smaller ones, 160 kilowatt turbines. I have actually seen them. In Phuket also they have. But one of the University of Malaya professors also found that from his study, he found that between South Thailand and Perlis, there's a break in terms of geological situations, meteorological situations. North of Sadao, there's a lot of wind. South of that, there's not enough wind. So you end up getting a situation, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, there's a lot of capacity for wind power. Indonesia also has a lot of capacity. Malaysia, although people, this Dr. Baru mentioned, Kudat and Pulau Bangu, they wanted to do an integrated renewable energy hub there, center. And this was mainly promoted by Syrian with funding from Moscow. That was 5 years ago. Up to now, it's not got up. So people who talk of getting wind energy in Pulau Bangi, yes, it's possible. Because University of Malaya Sabah has a 10 kilowatt turbine in their campus. But I never get any figures about how much energy they generate. I'm interested to know how much energy the Pulau Perhentian has generated. Because the state government spent a lot of money to put that turbine there. But they would have done better to put that money on photovoltaic.
So here is some the average yang dia punya speed
Yeah.
of the kat Perhentian yang this is the minimum speed for January, maximum and average. They have calculated.
So average is say 6, roughly 6. Okay. But that 6, is it base average for the whole year or the between the minimum and maximum?
Minimum and maximum.
So average, minimum, maximum values. If you get 90% minimum, 10% maximum, the average may be high, but the weighted average is very low. That's why I'm interested, not the wind speed, but I'm interested in the kilowatt hours generated. They are supposed to report to Energy Commission.
So why not they report the result?
I don't know what they are reporting.
In that research, he said that the data record for both wind turbine for the is produce 18 kilowatt.
This is a report by whom?
Research research yang dekat Pulau Perhentian
Pulau
by
Perhentian,
UKM.
UTM.
UKM
Either
UKM.
UKM or UKM.
Now the wind turbine capacity is 100 kilowatt. They can only generate 18 kilowatts. That also only when the wind speed is above 5 meters per second. So if the wind speed is below 5 meters per second, it doesn't operate at all. So how many hours a day or how many hours in a year is the speed below 5 meters per second and how many is over 5 seconds? And even at above 5 seconds, the maximum is 18 kilowatts. Right? Total energy produced by RE farm is 75 kilowatt. Okay. Okay. In theory, what they say is the surplus of 4 kilowatt is correct. But for how many hours? If 4 kilowatts for 2 hours, how much will be stored in the battery?
It's not worth it lah.
But photovoltaic, as far as I know, the photovoltaic there, I think it's 150 kilowatts, is working well. So that part is fine. Therefore, the energy produced by 2 wind turbines will fulfill about 50% of load with an average wind speed of 7.25. But your average is much less than that. So it cannot produce 50%. See, this is a kind of report. I say it's an imaginary report. You are putting theoretically, you are making some assumptions, and those assumptions don't give you the basics, the technical basis, and the statistical data to justify it. Just like I read one report that this was about 1.5 years ago. Photovoltaic in Germany produce 50% of the demand on a Saturday. Okay? But in terms of energy, only 3%. So what's the point of 50% capacity when the energy is only 3%?
Ini kan support about 3% lah.
So you can have 50% capacity for 1 hour. What about the remaining 23 hours? You use coal-fired power stations and others. So when I question them, dia tak berani jawab. And this is an international forum from Germany. I have questioned them because a lot of people, and particularly politicians and some of the scientists and academics in Malaysia are trying to promote this because basically they want funding from Moscow for research projects on wind turbines. Like I said, University Malaya Sabah has turbine. Unimas in Sarawak wanted to install. Now, I think UKM has a small turbine, I think 3 kilowatt. So, PTM, formerly PTM knows Green Tech Malaysia, some vendor came and put a small wind turbine, vertical axis wind turbine, on the roof. Okay. Turbine blades are rotating, but hasn't got enough power to generate any electricity. Not even enough electricity to light up the aircraft warning lights. So they put photovoltaic and battery, so the PV charges the battery to light up the lamp. The wind turbine goyang saja.
They just
And at exhibition, he demonstrates a wind turbine, you put a fan to let the turbine flow. But no generation of power. Because you need a certain amount of wind even to move the turbines to overcome the friction of the bearings. So the latest design is you don't have ball bearings, you have magnetic bearings. Magnetic bearings is floating, so there's no steering. Therefore, you need minimum wind speed to make it turn. Making it turn is one thing, but to produce power, you must have some extra force. So if you do not have that extra force from the wind, it's just for show, turning only.
just on, but no
No generation of power. Like we can get say photovoltaic, we can put a 100 kilowatt photovoltaic farm. Nampak dari cantik, besar. But if it's cloudy, you get no generation. And I know one of our friends under MBIPV installed a 5 kilowatt photovoltaic on his very energy efficient house in the Tiara Golf Club in Melaka. This was a Matsale who made Malaysia my second home. Now, he was very good, and when he passed away, his wife also kept reporting from 4.8 kilowatts PV, they were getting between 90 to 110 kilowatt hours a month. But they have a data logger, so it records every day. Some days up to 20 kilowatt hours in one day, some days only 3 kilowatt hours because cloudy or rain. So wind turbine is equal to like 3 kilowatt hours a day for 25 days a month, and maybe 10 kilowatt hours for 3 days and 20 kilowatt hours for 1 day. Now, I don't know whether you can get the data log of the wind speed over the period. I have seen some reports, right, which most of them show that the wind speed is below the average for about 70 to 80% of the time.
ada punya wind condition macam ni lah.
Yeah.
Oh, ya, ya,
Dia
ya.
akan tinggi
Tinggi
ada
3-4 hari.
early of year and end of year, but dia bulan 5 bulan 6 dia akan rendah bila depa lah.
Jadi itu pun di Terengganu, Kelantan atau Pahang, where you got the monsoon from the East Coast monsoon. Tapi tempat lain tak ada. Jadi Langkawi, that Sirin project was supposed to do the wind mapping in Terengganu, in Kudat, in Melaka and Langkawi. So they were supposed to have 10 masts of different heights. The same mast, you have the mapping data at 60 meters, 80 meters and 30 meters. So you can compare the difference. I think you must have read some internet reports that people want to have a floating wind turbine 300 meters up in the air. Inflated, like a balloon wind turbine. Okay, you can have it 300 meters up in the air. You got to bring the power down. How much it is going to run? If you go where the planes fly, the wind speed is up to 100 kilometers per hour.
So,
Tapi 10,000 meters.
10,000 meters.
If you get wind speed of 100 kilometers per hour, the normal wind turbine has got to stop because it will break down. It will just collapse. So normally, I think they have a cutoff at either 27 or 30 meters per second speed. Once the speed goes that high, they cannot operate anymore. They purposely stop it.
It's too dangerous lah.
And some wind turbines are broken because of that. Sometimes the tower collapses. Sometimes overspeed the gearbox jam. So there's a lot of maintenance costs. Photovoltaic, your maintenance cost is minimum. Only to clean it. And the cost of photovoltaics has been dropping very fast. Wind turbine, the cost has not dropped anymore because it's already reached the saturation.
So for Malaysia, for the renewable energy, photovoltaic is the most.
No, not the most. I would say the most attractive for Malaysia is biomass and biogas for the palm oil mills. But the biomass, because of what I call a stupid government policy, that's a national biomass strategy, has made oil millers refusing to give the EFB for power generation. Because the biomass strategy says that the value of biomass is 150 to 1,000 ringgit per ton. For biomass power generation, it was estimated to be about 30 ringgit per ton. So when people want to offer them 30 ringgit per ton, they say come on. They let it rot rather than sell it 30. But they want to sell it 150 or 200 ringgit, nobody wants to buy it because there's no market. Theoretically, the value is there. But the people who will need that, like for biotechnology, biopharmaceuticals, their factories are not up. They haven't got the money to buy to start producing. And even when they start producing, how much can they produce? Because Malaysia has about 20 million tons of EFB a year. I think about 12 to 13 million tons is used by the plantations for mulching and manure, fertilizer. Some of it, I don't know how much, is used for composting as fertilizer. So the amount available for other use is maybe 5-6 million tons. How much of that can be used for biomedical? Probably 500,000 tons. So what happens to the remaining 4 million tons, 4.5 million tons? They are being dumped into landfills. And I have actually criticized this. Government policies are self-contradictory. On the one hand, you have the renewable energy policy to use biomass for power generation. Then you have national biomass strategy, which wipes out the availability of biomass for power generation. And this is by an agency in PM's department, Agency Inovasi Malaysia. So I met one of the CEOs about this and I asked him, how do you put this value? Because by putting this value, you have screwed up the market for biomass for power generation. And he says, no, We are not saying that this is the value of biomass. We are saying, in theory, Malaysia can get so much. I said, you haven't said that out of the 20 million tons, about 12 to 13 million tons are going back to the plantations. Say, oh, that's not our road. Their job is to just tell Najib, oh, you can get 30 billion a year from biomass. And actually you get not even 1 billion.
So in terms of political, geological, meteorological, which of renewable energy paling sesuai digunakan di Malaysia?
Yang paling sesuai saya kata biomass. Tapi biomass must be reasonably valued. So instead of putting it in dumps, right, or letting it rot, use it for power generation. Like I said, the oil mills don't get. But anyway, the oil mills still have biomass pomade. You know, palm oil mill effluent? Palm oil mill effluent pomade. Now that one has a lot of methane. So previously, they used to let it, decompose in the ponds. Then DOE has now stopped them, and many of them have been forced by DOE to put cover lagoons, generate the methane, and burn the methane. Because methane's carbon dioxide equivalent is 21 times as high as carbon dioxide. So they burn to carbon dioxide, at least the GHG is reduced significantly. And some of them, even like Felda, certain, are using that biogas to run a power plant, a diesel generator running on biogas, 500 kilowatts. Now there's also a palm oil mill, there's a Bell Group. They already have one plant operating in Batu Pahat. They got a capacity of 1,700 kilowatts, but they are able to generate about 1,200 kilowatts through the gas engines, and they are feeding that into the electricity grid. And there are, as far as I know, I think Felda or Sandabi has about 20 mills where they want to convert the biogas from pomade into gas power generation. So biogas generation is good because it can be controlled. You can use it to generate power when you need the power. Wind, there's virtually nothing. Photovoltaic only comes when the sun is shining. Biomass, biogas, you can use them. The other good one is mini hydro, small hydro. Right? Now, mini hydro, if you look at the Renewable Energy Policy and Action Plan and the SIDA website, I think mini hydro is supposed to have a potential of up to about 5 to 600 megawatts of electricity generation. But people are not implementing the projects. Why? Nobody will tell you why. Because this is politics, state government politics. Because to get mini hydro, you have to get a lot of state government approvals. Land office, JPJ, DOE, and everything. And I think I don't have to tell you, to get state government approved for this kind of projects is very hard to do without lubrication. So a lot of projects, companies want to do it, but it takes them 4 years to get the approvals.
Just for approval only.
The construction can be done in 1.5 years. But there are projects that were approved 7 years ago, but still not operational. So if you look at the SIDA website, you can see how much capacity biomass, how much biogas, how much mini hydro, how much PV. All of these, when they approved it, approval date is given, when it is operating and how much energy is being given is all given. So if you do the analysis of the data, you can get an indication of how much energy is possible, potential. Now don't forget, a lot of people, especially the people promoting PV, talk of megawatts. But they don't talk of megawatt hours. Yeah. What does a consumer use? You don't use kilowatts, you use kilowatt hours. If you don't have, you can have the power, 10 kilowatts, say for your aircon. If your 10 kilowatts are available for 1 hour, after 1 hour you cannot operate your aircon. What for? But if you have 2 kilowatts for 24 hours, we can keep that 2 kilowatts operating for 24 hours. And this is the issue which a lot of academics, including some professors, don't seem to be able to reconcile properly.